Hello, my name is Jeff Taylor, and we are here today at the 21st CROI in Boston with Dr. Mitsuyasu from UCLA. And Dr. Mitsuyasu is head of the AIDS Malignancy Consortium and one of the leading experts in AIDS malignancies and HIV. So welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. Mitsuyasu.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
So there's been a lot happening at this CROI about AIDS malignancies. Would you like to share some of the highlights with us and what you think of the key findings have been thus far?
Yes, I've been on the program committee, as you have, for the last several years, and I've noticed over the last, maybe 3 years that we've gotten a lot more abstracts related to AIDS malignancies, which probably reflects what's going on in the AIDS community. This year we picked several abstracts that relate to human papillomavirus and issues related to malignancies and pre-malignant lesions. So to lead off on the first day, the very first plenary session, Dr. Doug Lowy from the National Cancer Institute gave a very nice overview of the development of HPV vaccines. Dr. Lowy is Deputy Director of the NCI and also has pioneered a lot of the work that led to the genetic understanding of how HPV induces malignancies, and he did some of the pioneering work in developing the first vaccines.
And these were the preventive vaccines?
And these were ultimately the preventive vaccines that are now licensed. So I thought that was a very good overview. We needed it here at CROI, and it ultimately, I think, kind of brought people's attention to this area. Now, I wanted to indicate that within the AIDS Malignancy Consortium that we have been very heavily involved in HPV research, both in terms of trying to understand how HPV induces tumors, but more importantly, how we might be able to detect early pre-malignant lesions and then how to prevent those from becoming malignant. So you'll hear a bit later from Dr. Joel Palevsky, who is heading up a very large trial, about a 5,100 patient study, a randomized controlled study, looking at the effects of repeated high-resolution anoscopy and ablative therapy versus a control monitoring to see how that will affect the rate of invasive cancer development. And that study, I think, is particularly important because up till now, many clinicians have not felt that that was an appropriate thing that needed to be done for all patients with HIV. In addition, I wanted to also mention another study that we're just starting now in women with HIV infection. Dr. Beth Steyer at Boston Medical College and Dr. Liz Chow in Baylor at Houston head up that project, and we're looking for 300 women with HIV to both determine the effectiveness and usefulness of doing HPV monitoring as well as PAP testing and HRA, high-resolution anoscopy, to determine both the incidence as well as the uptake and the feasibility, acceptability of doing these tests in women with HIV infection. And we know that women with HIV have a high incidence of cervical cancer. Likewise, they have a high incidence of anal cancer. And I think the latter has been overlooked by many HIV clinicians, and it really shouldn't, since the incidence of anal cancer in women with HIV is actually a little higher than in men with HIV. So it's important that those things be looked at. In addition, at this meeting, there have been several reports looking at what effect HPV vaccine, the quadrivalent vaccine, has on immune responses in HIV-infected men. This is the AMC 052 study.
Right.
And that study, which was reported by Dr. Tim Wilkin from Cornell in New York City. That study both summarizes our earlier report of the 3-dose standard Merck vaccine immunization schedule inducing adequate amounts of antibodies, but that a booster immunization further enhances the immune response. So, so I think there was a lot here related to HPV, along with a number of other papers that focused on other types of malignancies, including a theme discussion on Kaposi sarcoma. I think that this kind of reflects the importance of cancer in AIDS as the disease evolves, as the epidemic of AIDS changes and evolves. And it, I think, brings home the fact that we need to be very cognizant of that.
Absolutely, yes. KS, of course, was a huge problem early in the epidemic here in the U.S., and now is an enormous problem in Africa.
Correct.
And I understand the AMC has a number of trials that they're opening in Africa to address KS.
Right. We're currently doing 2 studies, very large trials, in conjunction with the AIDS Clinical Trials Group, looking at the effect of antiretroviral therapy, either alone or with chemotherapy, in early stage KS, and then a second study of different forms of chemotherapy in conjunction with antiviral therapy for people with more advanced Kaposi sarcoma. And we're also working with other groups in places such as Uganda, where they're looking at both the ability to recognize these tumors more effectively, and also to hopefully ultimately be able to find ways to prevent it. Again, a lot more work in Africa around KS since it's a bigger problem on that continent.
Absolutely. So anything else at this year's CROI that you think is of interest that people should know about?
Certainly a lot of what we do in oncology has some bearing on HIV as it relates to the cure research agenda. And many of the agents that are now being proposed for early stage study in the HIV cure area are oncology drugs. And it, I think, tells us that HIV, like malignancies, may be put into remission even if we can't get rid of it, because we know that cancer patients oftentimes will relapse. But if they can go 5-10 years without medications for their malignancies and then relapse, and we can deal with it at that point. So the oncology model, I think, does have some bearing on what we're trying to do with HIV.
Yeah, very exciting things happening with the cure, both at this conference and just in the scientific world in general. So great to see those fields intersecting and
yes,
producing some results. Well, Dr. Mitsuyasu, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you.
Well, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Jeff.